Ireland in the provision of such services.
You know what they say, good things come to those who wait. But 3 to 5 working days, lads, that's pushing it now. If I'm down in Arklow or Mullingar trying to order a new washing machine, I'll want it from someone with the largest next day delivery and installation area in Ireland. And that's appliancesdelivered.ie. Whether you want a dishwasher in Dublin, a new oven in Nace, or a tumble dryer in Tullamore, Appliances Delivered has you covered. Plus, we're the highest rated electrical retailer in Ireland, with a juicy 9.7 on Trustpilot, as voted for. Buy yourselves. Get next day delivery and installation now at appliancesdelivered.ie.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now you're very welcome back. So we are turning to review the Sunday sports pages. We have Cliona Foley and Andy McGeady here in the studio. I'll give you the headlines first of all. We'll start with a dramatic one on the front page of the Irish Sunday Mirror. Premier League exclusive, they say. Football, drugs, doping shock. 11 stars test positive but are allowed to keep on playing. Expert warns that Chiefs want to keep their testing results secret. We'll come to this in a moment. It's on the front page of the Mirror. We have the Sunday Independent. As with a lot of papers, Brian Cody and Kilkenny loom large. Here's the goalkeeper, Owen Murphy, jumping up and down. Cats reach final frontier. Cody hails his players' honesty after Limerick lose title in dramatic finale. We have more FAI business here. Beneath that, Dan McDonnell, who has a piece inside as well. Conway keen to avoid further conflict with Ross. And then it seems, looking at a few different papers, there's a big piece in the Mail on Sunday as well with Paul Cody from Carlow. Here we have Niall McNamee with Marie Crowe. The 2-tier plan could lead to player boycott. So he's not in favour of it. Quite a few players are starting to come out of the woodwork and say they're not in favour of it. Back page of the Mail on Sunday then. Thundercats, brilliant Kilkenny stunned the champions in Thriller to reach 16th All-Ireland final in Cody era, which is quite extraordinary. There is, by the way, Dublin Monster will destroy the GAA, that piece I mentioned with the Carlow hurler Paul Cody. He's talking about two things. He's talking about Dublin and the funding issue, and he's also talking about the fact that there should be 6 teams in the Leinster Hurling Championship. That interview is inside. It's on the back page of the Mail on Sunday. Sunday World then, Harry gets a link in, so it seems Manchester United will stump up the 80 million for Maguire. They had bid £70 million sterling. They're now going to pay the 80 million that Leicester are looking for, and it certainly seems Lukaku is on the way out. That one just needs to be finalised. We have the Sun then. The cat that got the cream, picture of Brian Cody. But Limerick, the cat that got the cream, but Limerick are sidelined. It was 121 to 217 if you didn't catch the scoreline. And then beneath that, Mike McGrath here with a Manchester United exclusive. Zidane back for Pogba. So it seems Real Madrid will make what he calls a last gasp bid to land Paul Pogba after shifting Gareth Bale, who it certainly seems is going to go to China now. Back page of the Star. This is in a few places. It's Jurgen Klopp, and he's talking about this is a fantasy land. He's talking really about the fact that Liverpool just don't have the money to compete with the likes of, well, what he says are the big four, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man City and PSG. He says, I can't say anything about what other teams are doing. I don't know how they do it. We have to pay the bills. Sorry, everybody has to pay bills. Back page of the Mirror then. Oh, we've done the Mirror already. Sorry, the back page of the Mirror hadn't done though. And again, it's Jurgen Klopp. Boss Klopp says Liverpool have bills to pay, can't compete with City spending. Also, Paul O'Hare here talking about Donald Conway and saying that he gets the nod at the FAI AGM. Although he does quote the Finn Harps rep, Paul McClune, who stood up on the floor and said, I'm not so sure this has been a good day at all. So it wasn't all smooth sailing yesterday. Sunday Times front page then of their news section as opposed to their sports section. An interesting story this, over on the right hand side. We might start with this in just a moment. Ex-Olympic boss Hickey touting for comeback board role. We'll come to that in a moment. It's Mark Tighe, who's having a good year, I think we can say, when it comes to stories and sport. And then the sports section of the Sunday Times, Cats by Whisker. Again, it's that picture of Owen Murphy, Kilkenny goalkeeper, jumping for joy at the final whistle. Kilkenny stunned champions Limerick to reach Senior Hurling Championship final. And then here, Mick McCarthy, who was talking to the press this week, saying that stars need to move if left out. He's talking about he'd much rather his players play games rather than be at big clubs. So he says, for instance, with James McCarthy at Everton, I'm saying he should go to the Championship to get games. He's such a talented player. It doesn't bother me if he's not in the Premier League. So that's Mick's focus for his players over the next couple of months. Let's start with the Sunday Times, the news section. ex-Olympic boss Hickey touting for comeback board role, says Mark Tighe. It seems here he's spoken to the Olympic Federation of Ireland, who are unaware that Pat Hickey met with Kieran Mulvey, the chairman of Sport Ireland, earlier this month. And it seems the implication is that Pat Hickey is looking to have himself restored to the board of the International Olympic Committee. And this would entitle Hickey then to a position on the Federation's board. So if you're on the Olympic International Committee, then you're allowed a position on the Federation Board of Ireland. However, it says here in the piece, the Irish group is adamant that he will not be allowed to return, is the gist of this story.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story. What surprised me about it, I suppose, is that Kieran Mulvey is the chairperson of Sport Ireland, and very well known in his field as a negotiator as well, independently of that. But Sport Ireland have also issued a statement saying that Mulvey met Hickey at Clontarf. Apparently there's been photos of him meeting him at Clontarf Castle, I think, Hotel, at Hickey's request, and the quote is, "In an informal, private and personal capacity, no Sport Ireland or Olympic business was discussed." So they're saying... Credible? Well, I just... What I would question about this, I suppose, is Kieran Mulvey meeting him in a public place. If it's a private meeting, it doesn't involve any discussion of Sport Ireland or Olympic business, then surely he would meet him privately and not in a public space, because the fear that if you were seen in a public space, people might interpret that wrongly. So I think that to me was a strange place to have a meeting if it was a private meeting, personal meeting. But Kieran Mulvey, as we know, is a very prominent person in Irish life, and in negotiations and labour and all that sort of stuff, and he's very, very often on media shows, so I'm sure he will speak for himself fairly soon on it.
Noel Rock is quoted in the piece on page 2 then in the Sunday Times. He's a Fine Gael TD, sits on the Oireachtas Sports Committee, and he said these kinds of undeclared meetings make people see the world of sports administration as too close and too cosy. And I think that is the key point here. It all looks a bit too close and too cosy. And I don't think a lot of people would find it credible that no Sport Ireland or Olympic business was discussed at all.
I'm sure it's possible.
It is possible. Optics, as I say, are dangerous things, though, in the world of PR and all these kind of things. So, as I said, if it's a private meeting and it doesn't involve discussing anything about Sport Ireland or about Olympic business, then why not have it privately, but don't have it in a a public space?
It's almost naive on Mulvey's part.
I'm surprised.
It's not his first rodeo.
Surprised me. And also, last week, the Sunday Times revealed that John Delaney had told his board that he had a meal with Mulvey in early March, and he had a phone call with him about the FAI's financial crisis in March 17. So, I mean, this is stuff that should be out. We certainly should be hearing this, and it should be being declared by Sport Ireland if this has happened. So, because it is about transparency, and they are a body that call for transparency from all of the people that they fund all of the time. So, it is, I worked with a journalist who used to always say optics is everything, and I used to say, oh, don't be stupid, But increasingly, optics are important, I think, So I would say that maybe Kieran Mulvey himself needs to come and give some clarification on it.
I'm sure people know at this stage, Hickey stepped down from the Olympic Council of Ireland, now the Federation as it's known, after the Rio Olympics in 2016 as part of an investigation into ticket sales. His leadership of the council was then strongly criticised in a report by the judge, Carol Moran. So the Olympic Federation, the Irish one, have spoken to the Sunday Times, and they say, "We were not made aware of the meeting between Hickey and Mulvey. However, we have a close and positive relationship at all levels with Sport Ireland. Our understanding is that Hickey himself has been vocal about the restoration of his relationship with the International Olympic Committee, but the position remains unchanged, and we appreciate the support we have got from the IOC." And then Mark Tighe writes that Hickey's been seen at recent events as a guest of the Olympic Committee, including the European Youth Olympics held in Baku earlier this month.
Yeah.
So look, if he is restored to the International Olympic Committee, and then by dint of that is guaranteed a position,
it would create a very interesting quandary for the Olympic Federation of Ireland, which noticeably, of course, has gone so far to distance itself from the previous regime that they've actually changed their name. Yeah. That's how keen they were to become a new organisation and to be distant from the previous organisation that was the Olympic Council of Ireland.
But if rules is rules, and he's on the International Olympic Committee,
it'd be very
again,
interesting.
Then he would have to be part of the Irish Federation. They have to comply with the International Olympic movement. So the piece doesn't speculate as to the likelihood of Hickey regaining his place with the International Olympic Committee.
No, and that's I would imagine that's quite a way down the board. Yeah, exactly.
Honest,
yeah.
I'd be surprised. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. The other story, just in the news section of Sunday Times that caught my eye, Joe, was Mark Tighe again and Paul Rowan, obviously following up on, they do some coverage, as many of the papers do today, on the FAI AGM and the President staying on board and various things that happened at that. But they have another interesting story on page 4, which I thought was worth looking at as well, just because it's a different angle. And this is because it caught our eye, and I think we discussed it before here, which was the appropriateness of the FAI announcing a 2-year sponsorship with a gambling company, if you remember, back in March, the Kenya Sport Pesa. And they are quoting an unnamed source saying that John Delaney, back at a board meeting, said at the time, this will be the last time we do a betting sponsor, and we'll get a bit of stick, but we just have to put up with it, because in Britain the FA have ruled out anybody getting taking a sponsorship from gambling, because of players having personal problems, and also because of betting, betting scandals on sport. So it is. I thought it was very interesting that the FA signed this this year, but it's interesting that at the time John Delaney clearly knew there was going to be some controversy and they were going to have to ride it out. And it was, I think, a 2-year deal, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah.
Because it is a very contentious issue now in sport.
Workplace have been in the news a bit this week. There was an investigation published, I think, in the UK about how they came to be and the kind of impact that it can have on families, etc., etc. This is not unlike the impact that sports gambling can have here. But I think it's interesting to hear about it in Kenya, because we're not in Kenya here. And it is different, and the things are set up slightly differently.
There's a really interesting piece, is it in the Mail on Sunday today, actually, about it as well, because they're using, even though they don't have a deal with the FA in England, they're using the images of English Premiership players in their advertisement, isn't that right?
Yeah, Harry Kane in particular.
Yeah.
And this isn't for Sports Pesa, it's with a different
It's a different company, is it?
but
Right,
also based
okay,
in Kenya.
sorry, correction.
But Sports Pesa are actually mentioned in that piece also. I probably should declare something here. I do a bit of work with Pro 14 Rugby, and they're also sponsored by Sport Pesa. So they're interested in a number of different organisations and teams, I think, to be fair. But it's when you look at it in the Premier League context in England, I mean, almost every club seems to have something. And then the FAI's complicating factor is the various troubles that some players have got themselves involved in. To do with perhaps or allegedly impacting games in which they've been involved, and that's a tough one. And that this second piece I'm looking at, this one about this meeting, that board meeting, and some of the quotes about the gambling connection, that they also, at the same meeting, they discussed a complaint from Stephen McGuinness, the head of the PFAI, and they talk about that, and there was, I won't go into the details of it, but Delaney is quoted as well saying at the time that the important thing was to get the PFAI out of the offices at Abbottstown. So again, I think there's some interesting other stuff going on around here. There's obviously a fairly interesting relationship between the Players Association, but they rent offices in Abbottstown where the FAI are, and so that I had never seen a reference to that before either. So there's some interesting stuff, general stuff there, apart from the AGM yesterday, that people might want to read, I think, in relation to the FAI.
Yeah, the PFAI story is very interesting. A PFAI source said it had not been informed that the FAI wanted them out of Abbottstown, but that it was not a surprise given how bad relations were with the association before Delaney's departure in April. Basically, the Sunday Times seem to have various board...
They definitely have somebody who's giving them... Yeah, they're giving them the minutes of these meetings. Yeah.
Last year they had reams of quotes from various meetings over like the 2-month period, so they have the minutes from various board meetings. And I didn't realise the FAI wanted the PFAI out of the building, but it seems things...
But that's implying there, exactly,
really sharp quote. The main thing would be to get them out of the offices, Delaney said.
Above all else, let's just get them the hell out. Yeah. Things were obviously very grim there for a time. So we should touch on this front page of the Mirror story, because I suspect people who've seen it will be thinking, geez, get to that quickly.
Yeah,
so,
well, we all grabbed it and went for it straight away.
Very arresting front page if you haven't, if you're not streaming us and you're just listening on the radio. So there's no copy as such. It's just the headline: football, drugs, doping shock, and there's a picture of a little glass container of morphine on the front and what looks like a syringe.
Syringe of some kind.
Yeah. 11 stars test positive but are allowed to keep on playing. Expert warns Chiefs want to keep their testing results secret.
Okay. Joe, can I stop you right there?
We all turn to page 6
in
instantly.
the editorial world and we live in, and the clickbait, that's the equivalent of clickbait. They want you to buy that paper for that story and nothing else, and it actually really annoys me.
Do you not just do what everyone does though and go to page 6 in the shop?
Well, that's what I did.
Speak for yourself.
And then I didn't buy it because it's thin.
Yeah,
Can I say that as a starting
I think
point?
you could say it's thin. Yeah, the headline on the actual story is even better if you like me are an admirer of clever headlines in tabloids, which is he shoots up, he scores. So that was a genius headline. Again, this is what's now known as clickbait to make you read it. But actually, the content is very, very poor. Basically, they're saying there were 8 positive tests in English football last year, in Premier League football last year, 6 in 2017-18 and 2 in 16-17 years. But the genesis of the things, the actual story seems to be, but that these players had TUEs, and TUEs are basically what you get to say you have a condition and you can take a certain thing for it. And you get a TUE at the start of a season in sport. So if you test positive afterwards, then you refer to the TUEs. So they're implying that these players tested positive for a variety of substances. Then it says some of them had TUEs. Then it says in one place 5 of them had TUEs. Then it isn't clear on how many of them had TUEs, but they seem to be not understanding the thing that if you have a TUE, you get it first. They seem to be implying that they were given TUEs afterwards, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that probably is the case. And then they quote a professor, they quote Dick Pound, and they quote another Dick Pound from former the World Anti-Doping Agency president, of them saying basically that, you know, most sports, a lot of professional sports don't want you to know that they have positive tests, and so they hide it, and therefore that's really, really suspicious. Okay, but I mean, we know that, you know, that they're not telling us anything new there. What you do need to find out is, did these players have the TUEs when they should have had them? How many of them had TUEs? And, you know, to me, it doesn't appear that they understand the principle of TUEs and how that works. So I don't know that there's much of a story here.
That's my problem with the piece.
Yeah, no, fair enough. If it had turned out that the TUEs were backdated in a Lance Armstrong-esque way, then you have a big story.
Then you've got a
exactly.
story.
It's when did they get the TUEs and
clear.
who had TUEs?
It's not.
And why did they have the TUEs? Yeah.
So what they've done here is they've submitted a Freedom of Information request, and that's the right thing to do. It's a good way of getting something like this. And they've got 11 players over 3 seasons, 16 tests total, with these players having taken one of these 4 prohibited substances. Of those 11 players, 5 had TUEs. What about the other 6? The sequence of the story, the way it's actually laid out, I would love to have been the editor when this copy arrived and said, you've actually got the germ of an interesting piece here, but it's not that piece. It's not that
or
piece.
be more specific, where are the
Correct.
details on this piece?
Exactly. The detail isn't here. I want to know about I want to know about the 5 who had the TUEs. Have they had the TUE on a recurring basis, or is it something that just popped up recently?
Yeah,
etc., etc.
Because it just contains sentences like this. Some of the 11 players were cleared to play thanks to a TUE.
Correct.
But for example, like it says 8 of these positive tests were from last season, right? And the 5 players had been they were TUEs last season. So 5 of 8 had TUEs, and then we don't know about the others. So like the detail is not there.
And I might be getting overly picky with it, you know, just phrasing. But there's one sentence, and to me, the way this sentence even is phrased says a lot. The sentence is, they show 5 players had banned drugs in their system and were given TUEs last season. Now, to me, if you want to get across what a TUE is, without implying that it was given after the fact, you put the TUEs first. You said there's a TUE, they had the TUE, these 5 players, and then they subsequently had this in their system. It's just, it's a pity, because I do think that there's a lot about TUEs people are uncomfortable with, because in various sports, not just in our part of the world, an amazing number of people have prescriptions for asthma drugs, for things to do with attention deficit disorder, far different from the rest of the population, and that should make us suspicious. I don't think a story like this helps.
Okay. We'll take a short break, back in just a few moments' time.
Get up-to-the-minute news updates at newstalk.com and on the Newstalk app.
Bruce Betting, one of Ireland's leading bookmakers. With best odds guaranteed on UK and Irish horse racing, Bruce Betting has you covered. And with the Bruce Betting app, we're always giving you more. T's and C's apply. Bruce Betting, in-store, online, and now on your phone. Over 18s, please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
This week at Dunnes Stores, tuck into tasty treats with half price on Mars, Snickers, Twix and Bounty 7 and 9 packs. Get 25% back in Value Club points when you buy any 6 bottles of wine. And save even more with our 10 off 50 grocery voucher. Dunnes Stores. Always better value. See online for terms and conditions. Minimum spend required. Please drink responsibly.
No one brings you closer to the game.
I'm Vincent Hogan, and in Monday's Irish Independent, our top team of writers have all the angles covered as hurling's Fab Four head for Croke Park for the All-Ireland semi-finals. Limerick, Kilkenny, Wexford and Tipperary are chasing the ultimate prize, and we assess who's best equipped for the final hurdle. Plus, get on a winner at the Galway races as Patrick Mullins, Michael Verney and Wayne Bailey mark your card for the first day of action at Ballybrit.
Only in Monday's Irish Independent. Sports writing in a league of its own.
For a limited time, enjoy up to €230 cash back on Samsung Quick Drive washing machines. Don't let your laundry pile up. To find out more, go online to powercity.ie or call in store today. T's and C's apply.
Nearly 1 million people in Ireland have high blood pressure, a major cause of heart disease. And high blood pressure usually comes with an even bigger problem, a lack of symptoms. Drinking too much alcohol can raise your blood pressure and your risk of heart attack or stroke. Look after your heart. Reduce your alcohol intake and ask your GP or pharmacist to check your blood pressure regularly. Find out more about how alcohol impacts your health at askaboutalcohol.ie. From the HSE.
With over 15,000 coolers available to hire or buy, HSS Hire has a cooling solution for every workplace. Research shows staff are happier when their surroundings are comfortable. And with HSS Hire's range of fans, air conditioners and coolers, you can transform hot and stuffy into cool and calm. Drop into your local HSS, with branches nationwide in Dublin, Waterford, Cork, Limerick and Galway, and get up to 50% off your first hire. HSS Hire, you're better equipped.
News Talk Breakfast.
Dublin City Council has refused planning permission for the supervised injection centre.
Serious antisocial behaviour in the area as a consequence of that centre being there and attracting people who have major behavioural problems. That imposes a cost on the local community, on local businesses. And, so if you are going to propose it in this area, I think, we mentioned the fact that a robust policing plan, a public realm management plan are not unreasonable that you'd be expected to say, well, look, I can manage and I will manage.
News Talk Breakfast.
In association with AIR.
Weekday mornings at 7 on News Talk. Across Ireland on 106 to 108 FM and at newstalk.com. This is News Talk.
Good afternoon, I'm Owen Murphy. Fianna Fáil is hitting back at the Taoiseach over his defence of the government's housing record. Leo Varadkar says it's better to solve the crisis slowly than with a quick fix. He doesn't want to return to building 80,000 homes a year, like during the Celtic Tiger. He denies the government's housing programme is a failure, but Fianna Fáil's housing spokesman Dara O'Brien disagrees.
Everyone knows and I understand there is no quick fix. But we must remember that Fine Gael have been in power for over 8 years now. That issues with regard to the rental sector started to raise their heads way back in 2014. Where now we have a situation where rents are over €500 per month on average, dearer than they were at the peak of the Celtic Tiger in 2008, where home ownership rates are the lowest in over 40 years. That's the record of Fine Gael.
Today marks the 21st anniversary of the disappearance of Kildare woman Deirdre Jacob. She vanished while walking home from Newbridge Town on July the 28th, 1998. The investigation into her disappearance was upgraded to a murder hunt last year by Gardaí reviewing the case. Her father Michael has again appealed for anyone with information to contact the Gardaí. He says even the smallest detail might turn the case around.
The important thing is that the information that we're looking for may be very, very tiny, and maybe the person that's holding it feels that it's not of great importance. But that's never the case with an investigation. The investigation detectives will always tell you that sometimes cases turn on the very slightest little bit.
A Fianna Fáil TD is calling for caps to be introduced on insurance claims. An opinion poll in the Sunday Independent shows 77% of people believe there's a compensation culture in Ireland. The average payment for whiplash is more than 4 times higher in Ireland than in the UK. Today's poll also shows 79% believe caps should be introduced for certain insurance claims, which Roscommon Galway TD Eugene Murphy supports. That's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Dull in the north and northeast today with outbreaks of rain. The rain will become fairly widespread and heavy at times through Ulster. Some light patchy rain will affect North Connacht through the afternoon. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk. The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Avantcard, powered by MasterCard.
Now then, you're very welcome back. We're reviewing the Sunday Papers. We have Cliona Foley with us, journalist and presenter of the Off the Bench podcast here at Off the Ball. We have Andy McGeady as well, who's part of the Under the Sticks podcast and freelance journalist as well. Just one last Sunday Times news section piece. I feel like we spent a lot of time on the Sunday Times news section. Is page 7. There is legal action against the RFU. This is ongoing legal action, so we won't say too much by way of opinion, but people might be interested to see what's happening anyway, Andy.
Yeah, and I note your warning from the lawyers on that one. But yeah, there's 2 fans, as reported by Colin Coyle, as you say, on page 7 of the news section of the Sunday Times, saying 2 fans have taken separate personal injury legal actions after being struck by rugby balls at the Aviva Stadium. The cases have been taken by female spectators, both of whom were hit in the head by balls kicked into the crowd by players. One was struck during Ireland's victory over New Zealand, that was November 2018, and the other hit by a ball during Munster's loss to Saracens in the Champions Cup, which presumably was the semi-final game in 2017. And so the legal actions have been lodged against the RFU and also New Stadium DAC, and that's the company that operates the Aviva. The RFU obviously aren't commenting. Rightly so. The wider point here, I suppose, is what at stake is probably the expectation, the reasonable expectation of a fan or a customer going to an event. They quote Tim O'Connor, who now I think writes in the Business Post. He certainly has a column there today. A barrister with a special interest in sports law, and he's saying, look, this is a large ball sport. I think that explains it quite well. So that generally a stadium and association have to take reasonable care as occupier towards the spectator, but this does not mean making it risk-free. He makes the comparison saying that rugby ball is large, not very heavy, not extremely hard, moves slower than a golf ball, a slither or something like that. It's mentioned at the end of the piece by Coyle, but in the US in the last number of months and number of years, there's been a lot of talk about expanding netting at baseball games, because we've seen an increase in injuries and often very, very severe from ball, sometimes even broken bats flying into the crowds at speed. And I suppose with the nature of today's audience, people are not always looking at the game all the time. And a number of months ago, a 2-year-old in Houston was very seriously injured. And after that, the Chicago White Sox immediately declared that they were going to introduce netting, which no one had ever done this before in Major League Baseball, all the way from foul pole to foul pole. So for people who are familiar with a baseball park, it's a diamond and it goes out. There's a semicircular, essentially a kind of a semicircular effect in the outfield. And there's 90 degrees on each side of you, there's a foul pole around, 100 yards away. So the White Sox, as of last Monday, had got this up. So they'd done it in about a month from the announcement. Now, the interesting thing from their point of view in the other clubs is that, well, does that now shift the goalposts legally? Because if your club has not done that, does that mean that you are now not taking reasonable care?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we're going to see this expand across the league very, very quickly.
But a very different sport from rugby, isn't it?
Hugely
Because like baseball goes on for hours and hours and hours, and it's a social event. Do you know what I mean? And people get up and get down and do all kinds of things. Whereas you're talking about one game, and then where do you leave golf, where people are obviously open to being hit by a ball? And also then there's that element for some people of the prestige, particularly in baseball, of catching a ball. Do you know what I mean? So there's all kinds of interesting implications to that. But it is they are interesting cases, particularly when we see when we're now looking at insurance costs for anybody in the recreational area, never mind in the competitive sport area.
Well, it could be a case that will be set a precedent. That's for sure.
Interesting.
It could do. It'll be interesting to see as it works its way through the system.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think that with the facts of the case alone, we don't know the individual cases involved, and that's why I think it's right to be careful here.
O'Connor does comment on the current case, though. So you mentioned the US and the frequent compensation cases by fans struck by baseballs during the Major League season and how that's led to the erection of nets around playing areas. O'Connor said that this was unlikely to happen in Ireland as the courts here tended to bear in mind the social value of sports in their decisions. He said the law generally offered special protection to sporting bodies because of the good that sports did. Freak accidents do happen, but that does not mean there will always be liability imposed or that high-cost demands such as netting will be made of relatively low-risk sports like rugby. So he is certainly not of the opinion that we will see netting around a rugby pitch anytime soon. But if insurance companies start having to set premiums and pay out, then who knows what will be anyway.
Yeah.
So there are a few forced-to-tackle fans hit by rugby balls at the Aviva Stadium. That's on page 7 of the Sunday Times main section. It's a busy GAA weekend. We spent the news headlines just chatting about Shane Dowling's goal, which was a joy.
Oh my Lord. I was still looking at it in the room going, I cannot believe he just did that. I mean, what a piece of genius.
It was magic, and he's such a great character as well.
But to live up to that pressure, every time he comes on, he's expected to perform a miracle. He performed a miracle, and still Kilkenny didn't fold. What an extraordinary game.
It was extraordinary. Of all the GAA pieces today, I think being Wexford on page 3 of the Sunday Independent is the one which grabbed everyone a little bit. It's a bit magic, this one.
We all loved this. And you know what? It's hard for GAA writers to find something new, particularly Sunday writers to find something new. But this piece by Dermot Crowe is just a fantastic read. He managed to find this guy called Kevin Whelan, an academic and a historian. He works in Notre Dame University. They have a place there off Marion Square, and he's from Wexford. He's a passionate Wexford hurling man, and obviously he's got American students who he has made equally passionate. He has such a way with words. He has such an understanding of the culture, that rivalry, that Kilkenny-Wexford border rivalry down there. I mean, practically every paragraph in this is a gem. It's just, I really recommend. Kilkenny people will love it, Wexford people will love it, hurling people will love it. It's just a brilliant read, and Dermot has put it together beautifully as well. And he quotes Dermot Ling in it as well, who actually, it's really interesting. So basically he's saying there's something magical about Wexford hurling and being a Wexford hurling man, and the pride that Wexford people have in their identity and how it's bound up with hurling. What is the thing he said? The 3 great things. Did you probably find it there, Joe Cricket?
Yeah. He says 3 things define Wexford.
3 things define Wexford.
Hurling, the rebellion of 98, and good farmland, because
that's right.
They'd see themselves
and
as
he doesn't ever he never has to say 1798, he just says 98 and everybody knows what they're talking about. And so he talks about how all of that is bound up with their rivalry, the feeling even about that they were the ones who carried the can in 98 and that the neighbours across the thing didn't do it. It's just a beautiful piece of writing, and a great day, great day for it to have it today.
Because the way when people say, oh, Wexford's a great hurling county, that's just kind of a cliche and you don't fully engage with it, but like he talks about it in a deep way. I'm a historian, And for 4 decades, I've been researching the history of hurling before the GAA was founded. Wexford was the county that everyone associated with hurling. He said after the famine, when hurling had died everywhere, there were only 3 parts of the country where hurling was still played: East Galway, Cloyne, East Cork, and then he says North Wexford.
Which is really
as well.
interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating stuff. It's also really interesting as well about Brian Cody. There's some really fascinating revelations about Brian Cody. So he says he was once beside Cody at an art exhibition by painter Mick O'Dea, and there was a picture of the Kilkenny team. And I ended up beside Brian Cody. There were a few paintings. One of them was black and tans. The next one was the Kilkenny hurling team. And whatever way Mick painted them, they kind of looked the same. So I said to Cody, look at that. Kilkenny looked like the black and tans. And he said, yeah. 2 killing machines. It's just a brilliant line. And the same evening, somebody asked him if he'd want someone that would die for the jersey, and Cody said, no, I want a lad that would kill for the jersey. And it's just, having seen what we saw last night, what a brilliant insight, in those 2 paragraphs alone. But it's fantastic, isn't it? Isn't there great stuff in it, like?
Yeah, no, it's really good. That's more of an insight into Cody than I've gotten in about 10 years. It's the truth.
It's just brilliant.
Do you want someone to die for the jersey? The obvious answer is yeah. It's like, no, I'm going to kill for it. I want a murderer in my team. 2 killing machines, Kilkenny hurlers and the black and tans.
Oh my goodness.
Stuff. Is the Kilkenny bus singing the Kimmage black and tans on the way home
my
there?
Lord, we'll all get in trouble here. But it is fantastic, and this guy has a brilliant sense of humour, brilliant way with words. Like, he jokes that Wexford is the easiest place in the world to carry out a robbery because most 4-digit security codes are 1798 or a variation. But it's really good as well on how, and then it's really interesting because he brings in Dermot Ling, who, and Gizzy, as we used to know him as a player, Dermot, who now lives in Kerry and is very passionate about all things, I suppose, how would you say, spiritual, and, he's a really fascinating guy. He says, no, I was there in the bad days after the great success of 96, and he says he didn't feel that we had that sort of support from Wexford people, that they were dubious about it, and every time we did something wrong, we could feel tension in the air. Yeah. So there's 2 sides here as well, which is interesting.
Gizzy played 04 to 12, he says. So he says, I probably felt the hardest place to play in those years was Wexford Park, because you could feel and hear the size of disappointment and the strain building up in the players. I don't know if the others would remember it that way, but I definitely felt it when I was playing. He says the character that we were as a group, we didn't embody the characteristics I think Wexford people associate with their hurling team. And he talks about that period. But again, it's full of great history. For instance, Whelan says, I could bring you to farms in Wexford where the Normans who came here in the 12th century, their families are still on the same farm. The north of the county where I'm from, we're kind of mountain men and we're Gaelic, whereas down in the south of the county, it's all the Normans. We tend to produce big, strong men, is what Whelan says. And then there's the hatred for Kilkenny, which again is
it's brilliant.
The 4. He's like, Kilkenny don't hate us the way we hate them. They're more about Tipperary or whatever, but we hate them. My wife often says to me, get over yourself. But if you're behind a Kilkenny registered car, most Wexford people will try to pass that car, even if it's on a bad bend, because you wouldn't want to give them the satisfaction of being in front of you.
And that is so GA. Like, I know somebody from Mayo who lives in Meath, and he says that this could be apocryphal or not, but he says that on a day where he knows a Meath they're heading to Croke Park and he's not going anywhere, he'll get in the car and drive slowly on the road to stop them getting to Croke Park easily. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where it is with the GA. It's that deep, and we're going to talk about Shane Lowry later on, but it is that deep-seated rivalry, and it's in our bloods, and it's very hard to remove it. And there's great humour in it as well, and the fact, that somebody like Cody, who could have that laugh with somebody who understands, that the great soul and that great humour that is in the GA, because it's down to our parish, it's down to our place.
And I think there is great humour in it, and great humour in the rivalries, because when he's talking here about you wouldn't want the satisfaction of giving the Kilkenny reg card being ahead of you, is because those 2 people will then sit beside each other at Croke Park.
Yeah.
There's nothing toxic about the rivalry, it's entrenched and it's deep and it's passionate, but you can be funny about it because it's not Millwall fans baiting the head off someone.
Well, that's something I think that maybe we sometimes overstate, that great, camaraderie that is there. But whenever people come from abroad, they go, and you don't separate the fans. That they find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. It is a great thing, and generally it is true that we don't have to separate fans. That they can, and we saw that last year at the All Ireland final with Limerick. Do you know what I mean? How people, even in the ground, took videos of them and handed it to them, and and from Galway and celebrated their thing. So there is that. And even last night, I think, again, people were going, oh my goodness, aren't Kilkenny amazing? Do you know what I mean? Even though when they were on top, we were all going, oh, for God's sake, somebody could beat them, please. Do you know what I mean?
But I think it was amazing to see Cody do this with not a golden generation.
Oh,
that's the most impressive thing. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, phenomenal.
So that's on page 3 of the Sunday Independent.
It's a great read.
It's a mixture of everything: culture, history, GA, Dermot Crowe, with Professor Kevin Whelan.
You have to get Professor Kevin Whelan on.
Everyone will be chasing Kevin Whelan over the next few weeks now. So there's also some pieces like Niall McNamee gets big prominence in the same paper with Marie Crowe. Again, the two-tier championship discussion is in various places. He's 33 now. He made his debut for Offaly in 2003. Talks about playing in the Tommy Murphy Cup to Marie. Says, I'll be honest, I didn't want to play in it. And says,
Wicklow, I remember,
the players didn't want to play in it. Half a team showed up. He says the current proposal is being, quote, rushed, hasn't been properly thought out. Says, I haven't even played against Dublin since 2007. We don't get exposed to that level anymore. And he wonders if it's all part of a push towards semi-professionalism, the top 8 teams playing for themselves. I don't know if that's the case, but he says if that's what the GAA want, then fine. But we need to have a conversation about it instead of bringing in this two-tier competition and not really telling anyone why it's been brought in. Do they just want to let the players play away down in the bottom tier and not have to worry about them?
And that echoes Paul Cody on the hurling side then, talking about Leinster hurling, and that's in the Mail on Sunday as well, so people will be interested in both those pieces. And that discussion is just going to run and run and run, really.
It is, absolutely. Paul Cody, by the way, you just get a real sense of what it's like in some of the lesser talked about counties. So, look, he talks about two things. He talks about Carlow should be in the Leinster Championship. He makes no bones about that. But then he talks about the funding Dublin received. From 2007 to 2018, Dublin got 18 million. Carlow got 856 grand. Say last year in games development, they got 1.3 million. Carlow got 128 grand. They're going to argue about the population. That's okay. But I looked up in Dublin 2017, they got 1.46 million in sponsorship. Carlow, you're talking about 50 grand to 100 grand, and on he goes. But he was saying in Carlow now, the game effectively could die very easily, because he says in Carlow, the number of senior hurling clubs competing has gone from 8 to just 4.
Yeah, they only have 4, yeah.
We said where we are at the moment, it's not sustainable at senior level. That's my worry. With clubs in Carlow struggling to field, hurling is going to die in Carlow unless something is done.
And one of the interesting things we know, and when Mount Leinster Rangers had that great club success, one of the things we know they do is their clubs go across and they play in Kilkenny leagues, and that's one of the things they've done to. So when people talk about amalgamations and the possibilities somewhere down the line that you may have rural places or counties that may have to amalgamate, like that's where it's on that Kilkenny border in Carlow. They actually go in and play league games to make themselves better because they don't have the competition internally, which to me is great. That's really proactive by them and shows that it isn't always about funding as well. It's about how you react. But there is no doubt that that people want the Croke Park to listen to their very, very real concerns about funding, about second tiers, football and hurling, and that it's just an ongoing problem.
Where do you two want to go next? We have a choice of Shane Lowry, Megan Campbell, Tour de France, cricket. In fact, have a think. We'll take an ad break and then you can... there we go, we're leaving it on a cliffhanger. Where will they go next? Back in 1 sec. More.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Avantcard, powered by MasterCard.
Get the best cashback rate in Ireland with the Avantcard Reward Plus credit card. Info correct June 2019. Source ccpc.ie. Avantcard DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
There's a smarter way to find your perfect 192 than following the crowd. Subtract all the noise that's out there. Then choose a reliable brand. Like one sculpted in Germany over 120 years. Filter the list for class-leading connectivity. Now select the one with the smartest choices around. Like 0% PCP or HP Finance, €3,000 scrappage or 3 years free servicing. Make the smart switch to Opel. Discover Grandland X and Mokka X at our 120-year anniversary event. Now on at your Opel dealership. Opel. Born in Germany. Made for Ireland. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance, a registered trading name of Bank of Ireland. Offer until July 31st.
Here's a great travel recommendation if you're off on your hauls, at home or abroad. 4 out of 5 of our customers would recommend VHI Multi-Trip Travel Insurance for reliable medical cover and cover for cancellations, lost luggage and lots more. VHI Multi-Trip includes all the trips you take in a year from just €52 when you have health insurance with medical cover abroad of €65,000 or more. Call Ireland's #1 health insurer now on 1890 444444 or visit vhi.ie. When you need us, we're there. €52 is based on one adult under 65. VHI Healthcare DAC, trading as VHI Healthcare, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland and is tied to Collinson Insurance Solutions Europe Limited for multi-trip travel insurance.
No one brings you closer to the game.
I'm Vincent Hogan, and in Monday's Irish Independent, our top team of writers have all the angles covered as hurling's Fab Four head for Croke Park for the All-Ireland semi-finals. Limerick, Kilkenny, Wexford and Tipperary are chasing the ultimate prize, and we assess who's best equipped for the final hurdle. Plus, get on a winner at the Galway races as Patrick Mullins, Michael Verney and Wayne Bailey mark your card for the first day of action at Ballybrit.
Only in Monday's Irish Independent. Sports writing in a league of its own.
If you're over 50, you might be experiencing deteriorating or blurred central vision. The good news is you can do something about it. MacuPrime Plus is a daily supplement for healthy eyes with the original scientifically proven ingredients and formula tested by the Nutrition Research Centre Ireland at Waterford IT. MacuPrime Plus delivers the zinc needed to maintain normal vision, plus carotenoids and vitamins. So look ahead. Ask your pharmacist or optician about MacuPrime Plus and help look after your eye health today. Always read the label.
Free yourself from fees with the An Post Money current account when you shop with any of our money-back partners. Like Lidl, Intersport Alvarez and Post Insurance. Customers have earned as much as €200 in a month. Search An Post Money current account or visit your local post office to find out how you can free yourself from fees. An Post Money current account for your world. Money back is based on spend with selected money back partners. See onpost.com. Terms and conditions apply. Onpost is authorised by the Minister for Finance to provide payment services and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland in the provision of such services.
You know what they say, good things come to those who wait. But 3 to 5 working days, lads, that's pushing it now. If I'm down in Arklow or Mullingar trying to order a new washing machine, I'll want it from someone with the largest next day delivery and installation area in Ireland. And that's appliancesdelivered.ie. Whether you want a dishwasher in Dublin, a new oven in Nace, or a tumble dryer in Tullamore, Appliances Delivered has you covered. Plus, we're the highest rated electrical retailer in Ireland with a juicy 9.7 on Trustpilot, as voted for a buy yourselves. Get next day delivery and installation now at appliancesdelivered.ie.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now then, you're very welcome back. So we're reviewing the Sunday papers. Cliona Foley is here, presenter of the Off the Bench podcast here at Off the Ball, freelance journalist, and Andy McGeady as well, who's part of the Under the Sticks podcast and freelance journalist as well. You wanted to go after your deliberations with Shane Lowry, who is all over the papers. The challenge for people today is, what can you say about Shane Lowry 6 days on after the country talking about Shane Lowry? So dig in.
Yeah. So first one is into the main section in the Sunday Independent. Eugene O'Brien writes about, it's a piece, an ode to Offaly. That's his angle. He's going to talk about Offaly. So just as we learned about Wexford, we are now going to get educated about Offaly, and I really, really like it. Because I'm a dub, right? So when I read some of these things in here, I am the ignorant dub that he's talking to, right? So I am the audience. And I'll just read a little bit here where he's talking about Offaly. In the 2016 census, the county had a population of 77,961 and it borders 7 counties. It is known for bogs and biffos and Moneygall and has been much maligned. A place with an accent as flat as the landscape and a laid-back reputation. A county people passed through on the way to somewhere else. When I arrived in college in the 80s, they were amazed that I loved Joy Division and the Jesus and Mary chain, and I listened to John Peel and had read A Clockwork Orange. How, they asked me, had I ever heard about such things in the bog? It goes on. It's really, really good. And that's the angle he takes. So the angle is Offaly, the Lowry family, what they have done in the past to bring such joy to a county that is not a glamour county. And then he uses that to layer in the joy that Shane Lowry has so obviously taken and the manner in which he has shared that joy with his people. So going back to, again, their famous wins of the past in both codes, he's saying, look, well, these things don't come along very often for Offaly. So by Jesus, let's mark it properly because it mightn't come along for another long while. And this is an interesting paradox. I think he's using this to talk about the GA of the past, but actually he's talking about Lowry. The GAA teams played with a great skill and instinct. They were not famous for training. They went out and had a go and played for their communities and families. And what's the point of winning if you can't take time out to enjoy it? He's writing about Lowry.
That is an interesting parallel, actually, now that you mention it, with even the hurling team and their reputation and the way Lowry goes about his business.
100%. And it's just, he's talking about this, and it's a really nice piece talking about, and this is the last quote, about the big, happy, proud Offaly man smiling back at them from the front pages.
I was really glad that he didn't fly out to Memphis and struggle his way
and took the time to enjoy it.
That he stood in Clara with 20,000 people and sang a song with his granny.
But doesn't that tell you about who he is, if you like, as well? And it's funny, the phrase "every man" crops up in a lot of these, and it's really interesting, that GA connection as well, because Tommy Conlon, obviously a beautiful writer, has a piece in, there's a couple of pieces, the Sunday Inder covers it very well, and one of his lines is, Offaly hadn't seen the likes of it since the days of Johnny Pilkington and Billy Dooley. And if anybody followed Offaly hurling at that time and knew the joy and also the impishness of Johnny Pilkington and Billy Dooley, they'd really understand that reference. Do you know what I mean? So he uses the phrase "everyman." So does Shane McGrath. But Shane McGrath's angle on it in the Mail on Sunday is, I think he says that his one is the everyman who popped golf's elitist bubble. And he talks about this is an industry enthralled to rich white men with an intensity that would make the most cynical gold digger take a step back. He's a great line about Roy McIlroy received intense criticism for golfing with President Trump, but he was hardly the first objectionable oaf one of the world's leading players had to listen to as they trudged around 18 holes. But actually, it's a really interesting, because I'm a bogger, I'm from Laois, I'm from one of those Midland counties, and I always have this argument with people that golf is not an elitist game. I never knew golf was a game for posh people until I came to Dublin, because where we lived there was a 9-hole golf course, and all the scratch players in the village were the guys who were unemployed, because so in their time they played, and they were brilliant golfers. My argument always has been that golf down the country is a much more democratic thing, that lots of people can play because it's cheap and it's easy. And Esker Hills, we saw all of that this week, whereas in Dublin it does seem to be, their clubs are very expensive to join. So Amos Sweeney's one is, and this is a riff obviously on the rugby thing, but his one is, golf is the people's. You read it here first. Golf in Ireland really is the people's game, and it's this argument that I thought I was the only one who had this angle on, but actually, people in Ireland can have access to golf and play golf and have a bit of crack with golf, and you don't have to be rich to play golf. And I think that's partly why we produce so many great golfers, because we're falling over golf courses.
No, it's a good piece, that Sweeney piece, because to hammer his point home, he's saying that there's actually a lot of pieces, and a lot of times you see there's a grant given to this golf club, that club, and his immediate reaction is to lash out at the cozied up to elite of society getting another sporting handout. Then he said, when you see, as I did recently, your local club being mentioned, it pulls you up short. And then he says, I know people who are golf club members, a barber, a guy who installs satellite dishes, a guy who fixes domestic appliances, a painter and decorator, and while they're hard workers who get by pretty well, they scarcely count as members of some aristocratic elite. And someone asked Lowry about this as well after his win. Were the celebrations going to annoy the stuffy golf establishment? And Sweeney says, the Offaly man wasn't biting. He answered, I don't think golf in Ireland is like that at all. Everybody can play golf in Ireland, and that's what you're getting at, Cliona. I think Ireland is one of the few countries in the world where it's not seen like that at all. And it's completely different in the States or in somewhere like France.
Exactly. He makes a point that Harrington is the son of a guard. McIlroy's parents worked 2 jobs to keep him going. The Maguire's parents are teachers, I think. Do you know what I mean? They're not from upper middle class. It's not a money thing in Ireland, and I think that's one of the reasons why we produce such great golfers. Number one, because the variety of courses and the conditions that they have to play in, and that really stood to Shane last week. But also that it's a much more accessible sport in Ireland.
It is not an expensive pastime in Ireland.
It's not a country club pursuit
at all.
The equipment's expensive, I suppose, and
Shane
Lowry was on the.
It's as expensive as you want it to be.
Well,
it's like being a triathlete.
Shane Lowry was on the show on Tuesday and said his dad had to borrow money for clubs for him.
Right. Right. And remember as well, he started out in pitch and putt as well, and that's why his short game is so great, obviously. But it is I think it has opened up for me, it opened up this very interesting debate of why are we so good at it? I still think that it's very, and even that image in Lahinch, a few weeks ago, people standing along the road, looking in over the road and watching it, you know what I mean? It's not behind, and in most places in Ireland, even the great clubs are not private clubs, they're not behind these big gates, there are some exceptions to that. But people can see golf and they have access to golf, And in my village, or my small town in Abbeyleix in Laois, we had two big sporting things. One was the GA and the other was the golf club, and it was a 9-hole course at the time. It's now an 18-hole course, but that's,
No, it's true.
And everybody played.
There is a stuffy element to it, but generally in this country, it's as accessible as I think it is anywhere in the world, genuinely.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a country where golf is as accessible in the world.
It's normal.
Scotland and ourselves, I'd say, maybe would be,
But there's a reason we won 10 majors in 12 years.
Yeah.
Puts us second behind the States, third are South Africa with 4. We are trouncing the field in terms of major wins. It is insane. Like, it's right up there. The way we talk about boxing and horse racing as our most successful industries.
Yeah.
Golf on this island is right up there with them.
Yeah.
They really argue.
And obviously, the Lowry thing, lots of people writing about today. Lovely piece of Michael Dignan as well in the Mail on Sunday, has a column there anyway. But he talks about how when Offaly GA was trying to raise money for the Faithful Field, which is their new elite performance centre, somebody approached him and Dignan didn't know Lowry well, and he said, unbelievable. Yeah. He helped them raise 100,000 with a golf classic, gave them his tour bags, gave them gear to auction. Couldn't have been more helpful. And there is that there's a good, the Paul Kimmage piece is really interesting as well, because
I've highlighted half
yeah,
of this.
Andy, you could probably talk about that one. Yeah.
So Kimmage takes a different angle in that he starts on the first tee on the Sunday where he suddenly realises, God, even though I've got the little press armband on me, I'm feeling nervous here on Shane Lowry's behalf. I want him to do well, and he sort of charts his 2 or 3, 4 interviews with him over the last few years, takes different nuggets. He was open at the start in looking at Lowry and seeing all the Ireland flags and the thumbs up emojis and best of luck Ireland this, best of luck Ireland that, and wondering where's the gravitas, where are the Roy Keane demons here, and wondering if he was an interesting interview. That was his worry.
Probably wondering, was he hard enough? Are you hard enough to win at this level?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I think you gain an insight into McIlroy. You also gain an insight into Kimmage in this piece, because firstly, he's really annoyed about actually wanting this guy to do well. You know what I mean? Because he's supposed to be the dispassionate, hard-nosed journalist. I do not care who this sportsman is, but he's saying, no. And the quote is, but Shane had got to me along the road. I was invested. And then he jumps back 3 years. And it's quite clever. So he's digging out transcript of a piece, of a section of an interview which didn't make it into his final piece, but it's actually very good. So, Joe, what you're saying there, he's wondering about this guy because everything seems to be happy. And go Ireland, rah, 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 pull on the clearing jersey. So he reckoned he'd try and shake his cage a bit. So he starts quoting some stuff from his Twitter page, and Shane Lowry was pleading guilty to all of these emoji-filled tweets. And then Kimmage turns the tables a bit and says, how do you plead guilty? How do you propose to atone for your guilt? The charge is outrageous populism. Is there anything about Ireland or being Irish that you're not proud of? No, says Lowry. Nothing. Well, and then Kimmage goes hard on this poor young fella just sitting down for a sporting interview. The hospital waiting list, the homeless on our streets, the kids leaving our country in droves, our clown politicians. I don't see it tweeting about any of that. Mr. fucking popular, huh? And he said he looked at me as if I had just driven a dagger through his heart. Enjoying it so far? I smiled. And that gives you an insight into Kimmage. He's just trying to see what this guy is made of. Is there another level here, or will he actually call and say, "Look, sorry, time up. This isn't what I was there for." I transcribed the interview, left that section on the cutting room floor. There was other stuff, better stuff, that reflected who he really was. When I observed that it felt odd to be talking to him in a boardroom, we were sitting in the offices of his agents, Horizon Sports in Dublin. He suggested we drive to Clara and have tea with his mother. And I think that's the jump off into the Lowry that we've seen over the last week or so, and that everyone has had a lot of fun writing about. But he dips in and out of his various encounters with not just Lowry but people around him like Padraig Harrington during the Open Championship himself to get the perspective. It's a nice piece. It's also a very clever way of using your old notes.
Yeah, for sure. Right, I mean, even just that exchange that didn't make the cut the first time.
And he uses, as you said, he uses a series of interviews and then wraps it up as he can very well with sort of a comparison with Tiger Wood and his treatment of his mother at the start and at the very end then with Shane's as well. So it is a nice piece. But nice piece with Dermot Elise as well. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, but just in that, I hadn't realised, I think we've all underestimated the damage Oakmont did to Lowry, where he should have won that major or could have won that major with the lead, because his performances in the 9 majors after Oakmont is what Kimmage puts here at one stage. The Open miscut, PGA miscut, Masters miscut, US Open tied 46th, Open miscut, PGA tied 48th, Masters not invited, US Open miscut, Open miscut. Now, that's a hell of a fall off from almost winning the US Open at Oakmont. I hadn't realised it was quite that bad. You know, majors can slip by and you don't realise. So.
Yeah, well, I only realised it when he talked himself last year after winning about, you know, being in tears and so and how low he got after. I hadn't really realised it. And, you know, I think the interview with Tommy Tiernan even recently as well, I don't know whether anybody's seen it, but he was on the Tommy Tiernan show, and obviously Tommy didn't know great details, but asked him really pertinent questions about golf and what it does to you mentally, and he was so open and honest in that, and I'd say a lot of people who watched him last weekend were remembering that and thinking, oh goodness, wasn't it great to see him putting those demons to
because he's incredibly human, and when you're incredibly human, playing golf is not easy. So you mentioned Dermot Elise then, finally?
Yeah, Dermot Elise I thought was a really nice piece. There's a couple of pieces about his relationship with Neil Manchip, obviously, and this is a very good piece kind of about Manchip, and there was a good piece in the Sunday Times, I think, as well. Dennis Walsh, again, about his relationship with Neil Manchip, who is obviously works for the Irish Golfing Union, but also is his coach, and about how he realised that there's a certain way to work with Larry that's different than other people. You know, he really seems to have buoyed him up and you know, really supported him in a way. He seems to be very good in how he handles them. I just think somebody is going to write a PhD on just the psychological success and how he handled it last week, because so much of what he said afterwards was fascinating psychologically. How he embraced the pressure, all of that stuff. I mean, sports psychs will have a field day with some of the stuff he came out with. I just thought it was very interesting.
There might be a lot from Bo the caddy on that one.
Yeah.
There was a really nice little piece, and my brain lets me down. I cannot remember who wrote it, but they were talking about Lowry having let it in. And so he was already thinking about winning too early in the round.
Yeah, he was talking to him about it.
And Bo was kind of just managing that. To manage that with your horse as he's leading the field, that's a serious job. That's the psychologist at work right there.
And to have whatever lead he had, to sleep on a lead at a major, like it was fascinating stuff. And Manchip was also, it appears from these, he's also the guy who lined him up with that caddy. So he's had a huge part to play. So there's lots of interesting stuff in all the papers really about it.
You won't be shorting Shane Lowry regardless of which paper you buy today. Tour de France, I must say, it's a pity, because I keep reading that this Tour de France has maybe been the most open and enjoyable tour in quite some time, and I think because of a little bit Lowry last week and various things going on, the cricket, and it's been a busy couple of weeks, it's passed me by somewhat. I was almost a bit surprised to hear it's concluding today. I had thought somehow there was another week. It's just been one of those tours for whatever reason. Plenty of pieces today.
Yeah, there's tons about it, and I don't know a lot about cycling, so I was interested to read some. John Brennan has a great piece in the Sunday World explaining how Egan Bernal, the Colombian, the youngest rider in the field, how he has been successful at this particular tour. So he goes through stuff I didn't know, like all the other injuries that allowed him to become the lead rider, also his background, you know, and it's in a few things like, where he grew up, the altitude that he lived at, what makes him a brilliant climber, all those things, and the fact that there's so much climbing in this year's tour. David Walsh has a good piece as well. Again, people will look and be sceptical because it's cycling. David Walsh has a piece saying cleaner cycling allows Bernal to shine, and he talks about, saying he feels that this guy has never been touched by any scandal, and he basically is believing in him. People will look at a piece by Matt Lawson in the Mail on Sunday. Brilliant lead paragraph. I mean, lead paragraph is what takes into stories. Talking about David Brailsford and the fact that he's overseen his 7th title in 8 years, albeit with a team with a different name, but coming from the Team Sky. His leading paragraph is a brilliant paragraph. As one of his fiercest rivals so memorably noted, David Brailsford has the ability to reach into a toilet and pull out chocolate. And it goes from there. But I know there were records broken in this year's tour. I've heard people talk about that, and again, whenever there's records broken and it's meant to be cleaner sport, you will ask questions. But this guy seems to be seriously talented and always had this talent, but has come earlier than they expected because, for a variety of reasons, all the people are out of the tour this year. So I don't know, we'll probably have people who really know more about doping and more about cycling than I do coming in and contradict me, but I'm just saying that's the general gist of all of the pieces. But they're well worth reading because he is a guy that people went, where did this guy come from? But people in cycling say, no, he was a brilliant talent. He's very, very young, but this is how it's kind of fallen in his way. And obviously the tour this year has all kinds of crashes and complications and people out of it and all the rest. So David Walsh's piece says, does this mean, he's talking about general about it, and he said, does this mean we should be sceptical about what Bernal has achieved? I don't believe so. He was 2 years old when Lance Armstrong won his first tour and now competes in a sport where doping is less prevalent than it once was. He was a world-class mountain biker before switching to the road, and there's never been a scintilla of suspicion about his progress. There is something more important at work here, and it is this: a clean Bernal could not have won in the bad old days.
There's never suspicion until someone does really well, though.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah, true.
We have to be cynical about a sport which has deserved such cynicism. It's kind of that simple. And until I'm not sure if we'll ever be free, really. But it's a shame. I'd add two pieces onto that, which are not about the winner. They're about two French stars and the weight of France and the French for a home win. William Fotheringham in The Observer, page 8. This is about Thibaut Pinot. Very much around Pinot, but you could also add in Julia and Alaphilippe, and I hope I pronounced that right, who had both at various times made the French public believe that perhaps at long last, we've got a home win. And it's quite interesting on the Fotheringham piece, and I'll get to the second one in a moment, the dramatic, tragic story of a Frenchman who has captivated the home crowd and is forced out by ill fortune and great physical suffering is a plotline the tour has written many times. It goes back to 1980, talking about Bernardino, which I thought was quite interesting, that he avoided a roadside tour abandonment by somehow getting to the finish line and then just being smuggled away in a car to avoid that circus. And I think that what Fotheringham's getting at, and over in the Telegraph, it's Francois Thomazeau is writing, as a French journalist, and he's writing about Alaphilippe and saying there is a certain romance that perhaps the French expect from their heroes. And that hero might not be a winner, that hero might be a glorious and very public failure. And I think those two pieces, to me, they were interesting.
Yeah, he talks about the Pinot. Basically, he fell into the arms of his teammate on Friday's stage because he has torn his thigh muscle. So, as you said, it's a dramatic story. It's captivated the home crowd, forced out by ill fortune and great physical suffering. It's a plot line the tour's written many times, as you say, mentions Eno. And Alaphilippe had ceded the yellow jersey to Bernal as well after that stage. So it seems like for the guts of 2 weeks, the French were dreaming, and there was a certain swashbuckling style to Pinot in particular, and they were thinking this might be the end of the famine. And then for it all to blow up adds a certain grim romance to the whole thing almost. It's here we go again. They can almost revel in the pain.
I know, and if you're writing the movie version, you just said, well, the weather changed. The weather comes in, and in the movie, when the weather changes, something is afoot. I don't know. Joe, I think I'm like you. It passed me by a little, and it's a pity because there are some previous years where I would have been hooked on those stages and everything to do with it, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just there was so much going on, but it's a pity. There's some good writing though.
Yeah.
Because we had the cricket, we had so like the last few weeks, the last week alone has been chock-a-block. There's always been some dramatic stories, so I think probably whether you're sceptical about cycling or whether you're just more interested in other sports, maybe that's
I think for me it's been the scepticism that I just haven't got into it at the start, and then almost once it's started, it's hard to play catch up sometimes. But I must.
And as I said, Brailsford, you look at Brailsford's involvement, you look at teaming, people will still continue to ask questions, no doubt about it, and rightfully, given the history.
In fairness, David Walsh did think that things were good at Sky a while back, so really,
it's and I hate saying it, but it's something we have to carry with our interpretation of Walsh pieces on this now. that is just a fact that he did think things were okay. And is it up to him to be the judge and jury? No.
No.
But
no.
he is an authority, I think, it's safe to say. So, yeah, it's a pity, because it's always going to come with it, that interpretation.
Final few pieces, clocks against us.
A few on cricket. Peter O'Reilly has one on the back page of the Sunday Times. Ger Siggins has one in the Sunday Indo. Again, suppose to look back on what was a very topsy-turvy week in the emotions of the Irish cricketing public. Big message here, it didn't really matter that Ireland got absolutely embarrassed on that final day.
Did it not? No, because I mean, Peter O'Reilly says that. He says there's no arguing with 38 all out. This was Ireland. A record low for tests here. Stuart Broad and Chris Wokes bowled with relentless fury and skill. They were simply too good. He says, but here's the thing. The very fact that England were driven to such fury was a triumph for Ireland. This constantly surprising test was one of those rare occasions when the losers will look back with more satisfaction than the winners. And he argues they won 4 of the 7 sessions. Is there an element of, Jesus, the old school Irish moral victory kicking in here?
Maybe, but I think you can't look at this test match without, and that's the important thing. I've just said you can't look at this test match featuring Ireland. Right, that's the big thing.
Yeah.
We finally made it, right? And there's generations of Irish cricket players, including my father-in-law, there's my interest, who played 4 years, entire careers, never even dreaming that they could get there. And players moved countries to try and get there, to play for a different nation. But now Ireland has a pathway, and that's fantastic. But you cannot view this test match without that first morning. That first morning where no one predicted that Ireland would suddenly come to play in a very, very big way. And whatever about the conditions and the pitch perhaps not being set up for a fair contest between bat and ball, Ireland gave everybody something very special that first day. And that's the thing which I think we'll all remember. But, you know, the 38, it's a pity. It's a real pity.
Well, I suppose the real cynics about sport will always go, well, that ruins everything that happened the day before. But I don't think it does, I suppose. That's what I think, that's the beauty of sport. You know, how do we nobody tipped Shane Lowry to win last weekend. You know what I mean? It's when something dramatic happens, you know, we can enjoy it. And even if the next day was a disaster in this case, do you know what I mean? And it ended on a real low. There's several people, Ger Siggins, obviously a couple of people writing today saying the same thing, saying, no, something good will come from this. Like what they did was amazing on that day. And, you know, okay, that happened, but something good can still come from it. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the general idea on it, really.
I'd point to something which isn't in some of the coverage. We've talked about this outside. Cliona, you put your finger on this, which is that yesterday morning New Zealand played South Africa in a draw, in a really exciting game. We should be seeing some coverage of that, not just as a match report, but with the World Cup context. This is a rugby championship game. It's a shortened championship. Ireland will play against, or touch wood, Ireland will play
one of either of them.
Two teams.
One of either of them in the quarterfinals, yeah.
I think there'd be room there for a piece looking at that game and what it would have told us either way, even a short piece somewhere.
The one I liked was Eamon Sweeney has a piece in the back of the Sunday Indo, just on Megan Campbell's comments on who's going to be the likely replacement for Colin Bell and the Irish women's team. And
Pretty strong on it, because Dave Connell is being talked about as the favourite for the job, and she says, I think if it goes internal again, Dave Connell would be an internal appointment. I think if it goes internal again, it's a regression for women's football, and what we're fighting for the last 3 years is all forgotten about. We need someone who's experienced from a club and country level, both playing as a coach, to come in and push and ask for things that will maybe put people in an uncomfortable position. And she said that this could lead to player unrest. It's an easy cop-out to just keep the job internal. There'll be a lot of unhappy people in the camp, a lot of tough decisions to be made by players. I wouldn't be able to stay involved if there was a regression. She's only 26.
Yeah, you know, playing with Man City, she's one of many really good women's players playing now in England, where we can see the standard is good, and also playing in a team that drew with Holland in their qualifying group, and 2 of Ireland's teams in that qualifying group, we didn't make it, but two of them made the quarterfinals and one of them made the final. So there's huge potential there in Irish women's football at the moment. And so she's raised this, and it's a very good point to raise. And he makes a really good point. He says a kind of faux feminism is fashionable in sports journalism at the moment, but retweeting women rocket sport, yay, or Serena Williams would so beat Roger Federer, or anyone who doesn't like Megan Rapinoe is yucky, is easy for middle-aged lads to do. It takes a second and costs nothing. The real leap is to treat women's teams with the same level of seriousness that we treat their male equivalents, and that's why this is a really important appointment. And like the facts are, Bell declared he was going on June the 29th. The FAI posted the job on the 10th of July. The closing date for applications was the 17th of July, and the interviews were to take place from the 22nd of July. And Ireland played their first European qualifying game on the 3rd of September. And they're playing America in a game, the World Champions, in August, on the 3rd of August. So, like, the attention that's been given to this, in my opinion, just hasn't been good enough. And this is really what I think Megan Campbell is getting at. It's a bit like putting an interim person in to coach the rugby team. Do you know what I mean? Would you do that if you're really serious about this game? Was that the way to put this thing together? I just felt there was no urgency shown, and then the timelines were very short. And I think he captures that well. You know, if you're serious about this thing, do it right. And I think
they'll probably argue they had a few things going on.
Exactly. And this is where all those things going on have implications for the grassroots of football in this country at every level. Nothing to do with gender or age. At every level, when there's stuff going up at governance level, the proper housekeeping and the proper development stuff is being neglected. And that's why this is a real disappointment. And also, I think there's a feeling within the players that the fact that Colin Bell, and Dave Connolly, by the way, has an excellent reputation, and he's done brilliantly with underage teams, and a lot of people are saying he should get the job. But it's interesting that she should say that, because I think there might be a feeling from the players themselves that somebody coming in from the outside brought a different standard and a different expectation and asked really hard questions. And he wasn't universally liked. Bell went for a lot of young players, and there was some disagreements about it, the way he managed them. But there's no doubt that he demanded certain things for them, and I think the feeling might be that if you bring in somebody who's got experience from abroad, they will have that objectivity and ask really hard questions and demand stuff for the women's side of the game. So interesting, and an interesting piece, a very good piece, I think, in relation to that.
Yeah. Cliona, can I ask you, do you think that the line about faux feminism, would you perceive that? Would you perceive that there is a fashionable thing about that? Journalism at the moment?
Well, not necessarily in journalism, but I think the whole, I think it is that sometimes in our desire to support women, we overstate things. Like, for example, the FAI, this thing of having 4 women on the board. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, why would you have 4 women on the board? Why not have 4 people, 4 other people on that board who know football, the Brian Kerrs of the world or whatever? It shouldn't, in my opinion, I don't necessarily feel that there has to be a gender balance there. What you would like to see is some women in there, because the sport involves men and women, and this argument has been made with the IRFU as well. But I think you want people in there who are really well qualified, and if that's a woman, brilliant. And if you want to promote some women who you see have the potential to do that, brilliantly. But I do think there is a danger sometimes with that.
Listening to Donald Conway yesterday speaking on this station, and he was saying they didn't have any female applicants for the board.
Yeah, that's referenced in one of the pieces in today's.
We didn't have any.
And we know from everything we've looked at that there aren't enough women involved at all levels of sport, and so that becomes a problem. Do you know what I mean? And maybe they need, sometimes they need more encouragement, different types of different training, or a different, how would you put it, a different attitude within the sport to welcome them in and then develop it from there. So you're right, and so that might explain. And so maybe you need a program at a different level, but not necessarily to put 4. I think parachuting 4 women onto that board may not be the answer people are looking for. It might sound right, but if they're not qualified enough to be doing the job that they should be doing, that doesn't make sense either, does it? But I would like to see more women involved at that level, because that also encourages more women down the line to feel that they can get to that level and therefore stay involved in sport at administrative level and governance level as well.
I suppose that's the big argument for gender quotas in the long term, is that you need to establish the culture for the next generation coming through to say, well, that's something I'm going to do.
Yeah, I'm one of these people who has mixed feelings on gender
So
quotas.
do I. Yeah. I think a lot of people do. Because
I think positive discrimination is a different thing than a gender quota, or retraining or having special programs to help women get into those positions. Then that creates an opportunity for them.
Well, Donald Conway was saying, in fairness, they're going to work with a recruitment company and try and identify female applicants who would have a skill set that could work, and they might get 15, 20, and then they'll look at what four might best complement the current board members so that they're not duplicating skill sets.
And there could well be women working in football in Ireland, in soccer in Ireland, at lots of levels who haven't put themselves forward, but somebody within the FAI might go, do you know what, Eileen Gleeson or whoever it is would actually be brilliant in this. Let's go to her and ask her, explain to her why she would be brilliant in this, and maybe she would agree to do it. Do you know what I mean? So there is a whole complex thing there when you're in the minority in any sport, of any level.
I'd actually bring it beyond sport. I mean, in any leadership group in organisations, we do have a very thin representation of women for most of the time very historic reasons, in that it just wasn't perceived as being I suppose, the nature of the job or whatever else, all completely misguided. But I think also the point that you make, Cliona, but maybe people not seeing that was a thing I can do, that is a place I can be. We talk about it on the sports field context. We've talked about it before on a different show, but the value in a young girl seeing somebody in the pages that isn't just there because of their looks or whatever, that just, there's something that I want to be. I could be her. I'm not going to give up playing sport. I could be her. I want to be her. Well, probably the same thing goes in terms of senior business roles or administrative roles in organisations. Someone needs to set a tone, and that shouldn't be at a token level. It should be at a very, very real level. And
create a pathway. Create a pathway that makes it easier for them to be there.
But it's much wider than just a sporting issue. I mean, certainly the way in which in my various roles in life, I've worked with a lot of male leaders and female leaders. And sometimes, I know it's horrible to generalise, but the way of thinking can be very, very different and very, very valuable to decision making. And that's something which I think a lot of us could do with.
And the pathway thing is, look at somebody like Lisa Fallon, who people have come to know probably better in the last year. But a woman who ends up working in professional men's football, and now she's got the chance and has got a job to go to work with Chelsea women. I mean, that's amazing. That's fantastic. But if somebody hadn't given her, and she's obviously given great credence to John Caulfield and people like that, and Michael O'Neill in Northern Ireland, if somebody hadn't given her a chance and an opportunity and encouraged her to follow that path, she would never have got that opportunity. She wouldn't have been able to show how great she was and then get that opportunity. That's needed sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to be allowed to fail.
Oh yeah, well there's that too.
There's plenty of men are allowed to fail. Sometimes other people are not allowed to fail.
Guys, we're out of time. Thanks so much for that. We didn't get to everything. We were going to touch on Darragh O'Core's interview with Mark Enright, which is very good in the Sunday Independent.
Lovely, yeah.
He's been through ahead of the Galway Festival, so check that out on page 11. It's very good. Cliona Foley, thank you as ever.
Thanks, Joe.
Andy McGeady of Under the Sticks and Beyond, thanks very much for coming in. Nice to have you back.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll take a short break. All eyes on Croke Park next.
News Talk Breakfast.
Dublin City Council has refused planning permission for the supervised injection centre.
Serious antisocial behaviour in the area as a consequence of that centre being there and attracting people who have major behavioural problems. That imposes a cost on the local community, on local businesses. And, so if you are going to propose it in this area, I think, we mentioned the fact that a robust policing plan, a public realm management plan are not unreasonable, that you'd be expected to say, well, look, I can manage and I will manage.
News Talk Breakfast.
In association with AIR.
Weekday mornings at 7 on News Talk.
Satisfying